the smell hits first. Not the smell of fresh bread as you know it. Something raw, heavier, closer to the earth itself. A woman kneels before a stone quern in the gray light of dawn, grinding wheat berries between two pieces of rock. The sound is rhythmic, almost musical, but relentless. Back and forth, back and forth. Her daughter watches, already knowing the motions by heart even though she is barely tall enough to reach the grinding stone. Around them, their village is waking. Smoke rises from other homes. Children cry. A rooster calls out across the terraced hillsides of the Judean highlands. This is not breakfast time. This is survival time. The wheat she grinds is not abundant. The harvest 3 months ago was lean. The stored grain in the clay jar behind her sinks lower each day. She does not know if there will be enough to last until the barley ripens in spring. She does not know if her youngest son, feverish for a week now, will recover. What she knows is this: as long as she keeps grinding, her family eats. As long as her hands keep moving, there is tomorrow. She adds water to the flour, just enough to make it hold. She presses the dough flat between her palms and lays it on a clay griddle over the fire, watching it blister and rise at the edges, turning it before it burns. 3 minutes, maybe 4. Then she tears off a piece, still hot, and hands it to her daughter. 2,000 years later, a man in an upstairs room in Jerusalem will pick up a piece of bread exactly like this one. Flat, coarse, warm from the fire, and say words over it that will be repeated more times than any other sentence in human history. Billions of people, on every continent, in every century since, have gathered around bread because of what happened in that room, which raises a question that sounds simple and is not. Out of everything in the ancient world, gold, wine, oil, lambs, fire, water, why did the Bible choose bread as the thing that stands between God and humanity? Why does bread appear on nearly every page of Scripture, from the wheat fields of Genesis to the wedding feast of Revelation? Why did the food of the poorest peasant become the holiest object in Western civilization? To answer that, you have to go back before the Bible, before Israel, before anyone had a word for God. You have to go back to a gamble. 12,000 years ago, in the arc of land the ancients would later call the Fertile Crescent, the Jordan Valley, the hills of Canaan, the plains between the Tigris and Euphrates. Wild wheat grew in stands so thick they moved like water in the wind. Hunter-gatherers came each spring with flint sickles, harvested what they could carry, and moved on. That was the ancient pattern. Follow the food, stay light, stay free. And then, somewhere in those hills, someone did something that should have looked insane. They stayed. They put seeds into the ground instead of into their mouths. They bet an entire year of their lives on the hope that rain would come, that locusts would not, that the earth would give back more than it was given. Staying meant storing grain. Storing grain meant defending grain. It meant walls and quarrels and watching the sky with a knot in your stomach. Every farmer who has ever lived knows that knot. Archaeologists digging at sites like Jericho, yes, that Jericho, one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on Earth, have found the evidence of this gamble. Sickle blades polished to a glassy shine by cutting wheat stalks, grinding stones worn into deep hollows by thousands of mornings exactly like the one we began with. At a site in Jordan called Shubaika, researchers found something even stranger: charred crumbs of actual bread, baked more than 14,000 years ago, before farming existed. Bread, it turns out, came first. Bread was so desirable that humans reorganized their entire existence to guarantee it. Think about what that means. We did not invent bread because we settled down. We settled down because of bread. Villages hardened into towns. Towns swelled into cities. And every one of them ran on the same fragile fuel. Grain, ground and wetted, and fired into the one food that could be stored, carried, traded, taxed, and eaten every single day of a human life. The people who would one day write the Bible were born into this world, a world where bread was not a food among foods. Bread was food. Their word for it, lechem, could simply mean a meal. To eat bread was to eat. To lack bread was to die. But no one built a civilization on bread quite like Egypt. And Egypt is where the biblical story truly begins. The Nile flooded every year, and every year it left behind black soil so rich that wheat seemed to leap out of it. Egypt became the breadbasket of the ancient world, and its rulers understood with cold clarity that whoever controls the grain controls life itself. The pyramid builders were not paid in coins. They were paid in bread and beer. Rations counted loaf by rows of scribes. Tomb paintings show bakeries the size of factories. The Egyptian word for bread, tai, appears in offering formulas thousands of times because even the dead, Egyptians believed, needed bread for eternity. And it is here, in the granaries of Egypt, that the Bible sets one of its first great stories. A Hebrew slave named Joseph rises to power for one reason only. He can read a famine coming, and he knows what to do about it: store the grain. 7 fat years, 7 lean years, and all the world comes to Egypt begging for bread. The Bible's storytellers knew exactly how power worked. Grain was power. Bread was power. Which is why what happens next is so extraordinary. Because when the descendants of Joseph's family have become slaves in that same Egypt, grinding grain for someone else's tables, building granaries for someone else's god king, their liberation begins with bread too. But this time, bread turned inside out. On the last night in Egypt, the Israelites are told to eat in haste. Sandals on their feet, staffs in their hands, and bread with no time to rise. Flat bread, rushed bread, the bread of people running for their lives. To this day, 3,500 years later, Jewish families gather every spring at Passover and eat that same unleavened bread, matzah, and by eating it, they place their own bodies inside the story, not remembering the escape, tasting it. But the desert on the other side of the sea holds no wheat fields, and this is where the Bible does something no other ancient text had done. It makes bread fall from heaven. Every morning, the text says, a fine, flaky substance covers the ground like frost. The people call it manna, which in Hebrew is essentially a question. What is it? They gather it, grind it, bake it, and it comes with one strange, unbreakable rule. You cannot hoard it. Gather more than a day's portion and it rots by morning, crawling with worms. Except on the 6th day, when a double portion keeps so that no one need work on the Sabbath. Sit with that rule for a moment, because it is quietly revolutionary. Every civilization before this one had been built on storing grain. Egypt's entire power rested on it. And here is a God who says, no storing, no stockpiles, no leverage. Just enough for everyone, every day. bread that cannot be turned into power over other people. The wilderness generation was being taught something that would echo down through every synagogue and church that followed. Bread is not an achievement. Bread is a gift. And the proper response to a gift is not anxiety, but trust. Nobody expected where that idea would travel next. When Israel finally settles in its own land, bread moves from the desert floor into the holiest room on earth. In the tabernacle, and later in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem, priests placed 12 loaves on a golden table, one for each tribe of Israel, in the sanctuary itself, just outside the Holy of Holies. The Hebrew name is startling. Lechem Hapanim, the bread of the presence, or more literally, the bread of the face. Bread set before the face of God, replaced fresh every Sabbath, the week-old loaves eaten by the priests as sacred food. Of all the treasures Israel could have placed nearest to its God, and the temple glittered with gold, the object chosen was 12 loaves of bread. Meanwhile, out in the villages, bread was writing itself into the rhythm of ordinary life in ways the law made permanent. Farmers were commanded not to harvest the corners of their fields and not to go back for dropped stalks. Those belonged, by divine right, to the poor, the widow, the foreigner. The book of Ruth, one of the most beloved stories in the Bible, turns entirely on this law. A destitute foreign widow, gleaning barley behind the harvesters in the fields of Bethlehem, gathered into a family, and becoming, the text tells us, the great-grandmother of King David. A kingdom's royal line, beginning with a hungry woman picking up leftover grain. And notice the name of that town. Bethlehem. In Hebrew, Beit Lechem, the house of bread. The Bible's prophets understood bread's power as well as any pharaoh. When Elijah flees a famine, God sends him to the poorest person imaginable, a widow in Zarephath gathering sticks to bake one final loaf for herself and her son before they die. Elijah asks her to share it. She does, and her jar of flour, the story says, never runs empty again. Over and over, the pattern repeats. Heaven meets humanity not in palaces or armies, but at the moment a loaf is shared by someone who cannot afford to share it. Then, in 586 BC, catastrophe. Babylon burns the temple to the ground. The golden table of the presence is carried off as plunder. The people are marched into exile. By every rule of the ancient world, this should have been the end. Conquered peoples lost their gods, their stories, themselves, but something remarkable happened. The exiles could not offer sacrifices without a temple, but they could still bake Passover bread. In foreign kitchens, by Babylonian rivers, families kept tearing flat loaves and telling their children, "This is the bread our ancestors ate the night we were freed." An empire had taken their land, their king, and their sanctuary. It could not take their bread. And as long as they had the bread, they had the story. And as long as they had the story, they survived. 5.5 centuries later, the land of Israel is occupied again, this time by Rome, the greatest grain empire the world had ever seen. Rome's mobs were kept quiet with free bread. Her own satirists sneered that the people wanted only two things: panem et circenses, bread and circuses. In Galilee, peasant farmers watched their harvests bleed away in taxes to Rome, to Herod, to the temple, and prayed they'd keep enough back to eat. Into this hungry, occupied world, in the town called the House of Bread, a child is born. And when he grows up and begins to teach, listen to what he actually talks about. He tells stories about a woman kneading leaven into 3 measures of flour, about seed falling on good soil and bad, about a farmer sleeping while wheat grows secretly in the dark. First the stalk, then the head, then the full grain. About a father who would never hand his hungry child a stone instead of a loaf. When his followers ask him how to pray, he gives them a prayer with exactly one physical request in it. Not health, not safety, not victory. Give us this day our daily bread. One day's portion. No hoarding. It is the manna rule, reborn as a prayer. And then there is the afternoon on the hillside. Thousands of people have followed him into the countryside near the Sea of Galilee, far from any village, and evening is coming on. The disciples do the math and panic. All that can be found is one boy's food, 5 small barley loaves. Barley, worth noting, was the cheap grain, the poor man's bread. He takes the loaves, looks up to heaven, gives thanks, breaks them, and the bread simply does not run out. Everyone eats. 12 baskets of broken pieces are gathered afterward, one for each tribe, as if to say, the God of the manna is at work again, and this time there is more than enough. It is the only miracle recorded in all 4 Gospels. The early church could not stop telling it. And the crowd's reaction tells you everything about what bread meant in that world. They try to seize him and make him king on the spot. Feed people, and they will crown you. Rome had built an empire on that principle. He refuses the crown. And the next day he says something that scandalizes even his own followers, words that would have sounded like madness in any other mouth. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Not, I bring bread. I am bread. Everything the Bible had been saying about bread for 1,000 years, the gift that falls from heaven, the presents set before God's face, the daily portion that teaches trust, the loaf that multiplies when shared by the poor. All of it suddenly collapses into a single person, and it is all pointing toward one particular night. Jerusalem, springtime. The city is packed with pilgrims for Passover, and the smell of roasting lamb and baking matzah hangs over every rooftop. In an upstairs room, 13 men recline around a low table for the ancient meal of liberation. The same unleavened bread eaten in haste on the last night in Egypt, 13 centuries before. He knows, the Gospels say, that this is his last night. Soldiers are already being gathered. One of the men at the table has already taken the money. And what does he do with his final hours? He does what the woman at the beginning of our story did, what the widow of Zarephath did, what every mother in Israel had done every morning for 3,000 years. He takes bread, he gives thanks, he breaks it, and then he passes the pieces around the table and says the words, "This is my body, given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Consider what he is handing them. Not a scroll, though he could have written one. Not a monument, a ring of standing stones, a creed to memorize. He entrusts his entire memory, everything he was, to the most perishable, most ordinary, most universal object in their world. A piece of bread, something a child could hold, something the poorest household on earth could make. He places himself into the one act no human being can go without, so that remembering him would never require wealth or literacy or a temple. Only flour, water, fire, and hands willing to break and share. Within a day, He is dead, executed by the grain empire. His followers scatter. And then, the accounts insist, on the road to a village called Emmaus, 2 of them walk for hours beside a stranger they fail to recognize. He is a stranger right up until the moment they sit down to eat, and he takes the bread and gives thanks and breaks it. And their eyes were opened. The text says, "And they knew him in the breaking of the bread." That phrase, the breaking of the bread, became the early Christians' name for what they did. Not the ceremony, not the ritual, the breaking of the bread. They met in ordinary homes, at ordinary tables, and the book of Acts describes their life in one line. They devoted themselves to the teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. When persecution came, they carried the bread underground, beneath the streets of Rome. In the candle-lit tunnels of the catacombs, Christians gathered among their dead, and on the walls they painted. Not crosses at first. The cross was still too raw, an instrument of execution. They painted bread. In the catacomb of Priscilla, a fresco from within living memory of the apostles shows a group of figures reclining at a table. A cup, plates of loaves, and baskets. Baskets full of broken bread, echoing the 12 on the Galilean hillside. Archaeologists call it the fractio panis, the breaking of the bread. In the darkest place the ancient world could offer, a tomb under an empire that wanted them dead, the image these people chose for hope was a shared loaf. Rome fell. The bread did not. It went on, lifted in golden basilicas and mud-walled village churches, carried by monks to the edges of the map, torn and passed hand to hand in cathedrals and prison cells and refugee camps, in every language, on every continent, every single day, for 2,000 years and counting. Whatever else divides the billions who have taken part in that meal, they have all done the same simple thing: taken bread, given thanks, broken it, and shared it. It is, by any measure, the longest continuously repeated act in human history. And it is worth asking, one last time, why bread? Wine intoxicates, gold impresses, fire terrifies. But bread is the food of dependence. No one grows it alone. It takes soil and rain and seed and harvest and millstone and fire and someone's 2 hands, every step a small act of faith. It must be made fresh again and again. You cannot hoard it, any more than the Israelites could hoard the manna. And it only becomes what it is meant to be when it is broken. A loaf kept whole feeds no one. So return at the end to where we began. The woman at the grinding stone in the gray dawn, her daughter beside her, the fire catching, the flat loaf blistering on the clay. She will never write a book. No archaeologist will learn her name. And yet everything ran through her hands. The ancient gamble of the first farmers, the manna's daily portion, the 12 loaves before the face of God, the fields of Bethlehem, the barley loaves on the hillside, the broken bread in the upper room, the painted baskets in the catacombs. All of it, the same simple act she performs this morning without ceremony. Grain, water, fire, and love, transformed into another day of life for the people at her table. The Bible chose bread because bread was already telling the truth, that life is given, not owned, that enough for today is enough, that what is broken and shared does not diminish, it multiplies. For 3,000 years, the people of that book have said a blessing over every loaf. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. The next time you hold a piece of bread, anywhere, hold it a moment longer. You are holding the oldest prayer in the world. It was never just bread. It was always the whole story, waiting to be broken open.